Yeah, who was Karl Bechstein? Karl Bechstein was the founder of the Bechstein Company in 1853. He founded in Berlin the company and he made the company Germany's leading piano maker. The years from 1870 up to World War One, there were a dramatic increase in sale, a success story without it was a really example of success story. Bechstein supplied also piano to Queen Victoria and other important political aristocratic families throughout Europe. In the 1920s and 1930s, the company owners, Edwin and Helene Bechstein, were the early supporter of Adolf Hitler. But we have to know that they didn't really profit from this connection. So the company itself had also a negative impact because they lost a lot of Jewish clients. And the Jewish clients were good clients, wealthy clients, so they lost, and also the sales declined in the time after Nazi regime seized power. Yeah, that's also we have to bear in mind. Yeah, so we see that the Bechsteins must be very not convicted, convinced with the National Socialist idea because the company had not really get a positive impact from this connection. During World War II, Bechstein's factories were also damaged by the air bombing and partly used also for war production. Also that. So it was altogether not a business model. After 1945, the company was seized by the Allies because of its link to the leadership. Yeah, today the Carl Bechstein Company openly acknowledged this dark chapter. The firm distances itself from Helene Bechstein's political role and emphasizes its focus on music, craftsmanship, and historical responsibility. So they have now a new story, new people, and not a link. They don't want to be linked to this time. Helene Bechstein, yeah, who was linked to Adolf Hitler, was not merely the wife of a rich industrialist in the first half of the 20th century, but one of the early and highly influential supporters of the Nazi movement, who through her personal relationship had a significant impact on Adolf Hitler's life and political career. Several historians have pointed out that Helene's role went far beyond mere financial support. She was the one who introduced the young politician Adolf Hitler to the world and to the social elite, shaped his manners. She was also a trainer for him, shaped his appearance, and provided him with the maternal emotional support in the background on numerous occasions, like a coach. Yeah, this raises a very interesting and legitimate question. It is indeed striking that in the most biographies, like Joachim Fest, or also Ian Kershaw, like the big names, we don't have much material on this site. We know that Volker Ulrich emphasizes more, it's the latest biography, he emphasizes more the private role and he emphasizes more that the political conservative elites in Germany also played a major role. So he will also show this side. But altogether, they are not talking about Helene Bechstein. Helene Bechstein appears only as a marginal figure, despite the fact that during the 20s she played, and her husband also, a decisive role in Hitler's social and financial rise. Helene Bechstein's personal correspondence, diaries, and family papers have not survived, are inaccessible, and for decades, although the Bechstein company itself sought to distance itself from its past. Because of this, historians have had to rely on very few primary sources, mostly secondary recollections. For example, things said by Ernst Hamstengel, who knew Hitler in the at the beginning of his political career, or Konrad Haydn. In the 1920s, when Hitler was still a barely known figure in German politics, it was through Helene Bechstein that he gained access also to aristocratic and industrial circles. And without them, he probably would never have managed to secure a foothold among the ruling elite. Yeah, that was very important at the end before seizing the power. Thanks to the Bechstein family's extensive cultural and social influence, Helene Bechstein could, from an early age, act as a kind of surrogate mother also in Hitler's life. Yeah, also in the private life. She looked after him, supported him, and aided, yeah, and actively aided his political ascent. Yeah, yeah. Volker Ulrich had also in his biography he spoke as Hitler about the time he authored the book he calls ascent. So it is a political ascent of Hitler in the 20s. In this episode, we will examine the specific means, roles, and motivations through which Helene Bechstein helped Hitler on his path, and how this peculiar yet controversial relationship developed. A little known but significant background story of the early years of the Nazi regime, we can call it. Let's go back. In 1921, Dietrich Eckart, who was a close friend of the Bechstein family, introduced Adolf Hitler to Mr. and Mrs. Bechstein. Dietrich Eckart was a German folk poet, playwright, writer, journalist, publicist, and political right-wing activist, one of the founders of the DAP, the forerunner of the NSDAP. Eckart was not an ordinary man. He played a key role in shaping, mentoring also Adolf Hitler's personality in 1920, serving as one of the future dictator's most important and early mentors. In Berlin, where Eckart had better connections among the wealthy and powerful, yeah, Hitler had no connection at all. They together raised significant sums of money, including from high-ranking officials of the Pan-German League. The two often traveled, so Eckart and Hitler often traveled to the capital Berlin together. In 1920, Adolf Hitler was in a financial unstable situation and lived under very limited means. When we let's show his sources of income, they consisted mainly of regular payment from the Reichswehr, so he had some payment from the Reichswehr, and occasional speaking fees of about 50 marks per appearance, and occasional private donation. That's all. At that time, he had no apartment, no property, no car, and no significant personal possessions. He lived in a rented room in Tierstraße 41. Yeah, he lived actually at the bare minimum, social minimum, though he had, though we know that he lived before even worse. Before World War I, he lived even in Vienna, even worse. Helene Bechstein's help from Berlin was particularly important since 1920 and 1921. Hitler and Eckart were repeatedly rejected by potential and potent donors in Berlin, and often ridiculed and not taken seriously. They failed to make a positive impression on the Berliners and also on right wing politicians like Waldemar Pabst, an important Freikorps leader known as Big Waldemar. He reportedly told them, "The way you look, guys, and talk, people will laugh you out of the room," said. So, she said, "You are looking strange, guys. Who will give money to you? Nobody. You are two nobodies." So that said Big Waldemar. Helene Bechstein quickly developed an affection for the poor we can say poor Hitler. Richard Wagner, the composer, was their shared passion. Opera, theater, and art were topics through which Hitler always managed to impress on women. In 1923, through the mediation of Edwin and Helene Bechstein and Dietrich Eckart also, Hitler met Siegfried Wagner at the end, Richard Wagner's son, in person, and get access to the so-called Wagner Circle. At that time, Bechstein was the guardian of Wagner's daughter Winifred and was responsible for her education. So the Bechstein had really a very close look or access to the family. They were a tutor, educator. What united everybody, both the Wagner circle and the Bechstein family with Hitler was their shared anti-Semitism also, which Helene Bechstein never concealed. Later, Hitler was even allowed to stay in one of the Bechsteins' apartments. During their stays in Munich, they regularly entertained and invited Hitler at the Hitler at the hotel, Vier Jahreszeiten, Four Seasons Hotel. Helene Bechstein also invited Adolf Hitler to her conservative salon in Berlin, Saloon, where conservative people, rich people, met each other speaking about philosophy and esoterical stuff, and having a nice evening. Here we can speak of a crucial function, image making. Helene Bechstein tried to present Hitler as a gentleman in Berlin's elite circle. One of Helene Bechstein's most famous alleged statements was, and she said this statement openly in her saloon, "He will be Germany's next chancellor." With this, she not only declared her faith in Hitler, but also actively contributed to making him taken seriously in political circles, helping to transform his image from that of a radical agitator into that of a national leader. Helene Bechstein considered herself Hitler's foster mother when he was imprisoned, especially in Landsberg in 1924. While in Landsberg prison, Hitler received all sorts of gifts from admirers. And after his release, Hitler himself complained that the abundance of strudels, cakes, sweets had made him gain weight. I have to go on a diet. That was the first thing when he left the prison. That was the time in the prison.